Hi everyone, it's Gardener Ellie here, and today I am in the school garden at Kennedy Longfellow. And now the last few weeks we've talked a lot about plants and plant parts like stems and flowers and seeds. And we've talked a lot about how those plant parts help the plant survive and grow. And now I'm starting to get really curious about what sort of animals we can find here in the garden. Plants are super cool, and we've talked a lot about plants, but I really want to show you some animals that we might find here in the garden. And specifically, we are going to look for worms. So let's now get digging and see if we can find some worms and start to think about what our worms may need to survive and grow. As we start to look for worms in the garden, where do you think we should first take a look? So a place that I think I would like to start looking is in the soil. So let's go ahead and take our trusty little shovel tool and carefully dig in the soil to see if we can find some worms. So here is a worm that I just found after digging in the soil. And now let's take a close observation. So what do we notice about our worm? And what do you think a worm needs to live and grow? Here's a closer view of our worm so we can observe even better. How do you think worms and plants are different? Do you think that both our worms and plants need the same things to be able to live and grow here in the garden? I'm curious to see what sort of observations and ideas you have about our worms. Here is another worm that I found while digging in the garden, and now it's zooming along the garden soil. And as we take another closer look, I'm curious to see what you think a worm needs to live and grow, and to think more about what you notice as we watch this worm. Now, something I'm noticing is the color of our worm. So our worm seems to me to have a lot of kind of light colors. But then in some parts of the worm, like right over here and down over here, there's a lot of dark color. And I'm really curious to think more about what that might be. What do you all notice? We found worms in the soil, but now I'm wondering if we can find worms somewhere else in the garden. So over here is our compost bin, and that's where I put any dead plants or weeds and all of that good stuff that I want to break down. So here I have a pile of dead plants and compost in the compost bin. And I wonder if we take a closer look, we can find some worms. What do you all think? So I'm starting to look around, and if I look over here on the sides, I see some worms. Do you see them too? There's actually a ton. So let's look at the lid here. Those are all worms all along our top. Look at all those worms. And now, as we've been looking at our worms some more, I'm starting to wonder why they're in this compost bin. So now I am not in the garden, but I wanted to show you an indoor worm bin because you might be making one of these in your classroom. So let's take a look at this worm bin. And as we look inside, what do you notice? And what do you think our worms need to live and grow? And how do you think that this worm bin habitat looks different from the garden habitat where we found our worms in the soil? So let's take a closer look and see if we can find some worms. So I see one right over there, hiding amongst the green. And I see some more scattered around the worm bin. So what did you think of all those worms? So I'm really glad that we got to find some worms in the garden and that we also got to take a look at our worms right here in the worm bin. And I'm really curious to see what sort of observations you all made about our worms. So what did you notice? And what do you think worms need to be able to grow? And how is that similar to our plants? And how is it different? I'm really curious to see how you think worms are different from plants. And I will see you in our next lesson. And I'm really excited to talk all about worms with you. Bye!